The wind was cold that afternoon, and the sky was heavy with gray clouds. The narrow road stretched far into the distance with no houses nearby, no shops, and no people walking. It was the kind of place where time felt slower and the silence felt louder. A teenage girl stood on the side of that road next to a small old car that had clearly seen better days. The paint was faded, the bumper was scratched, and the back right tire was completely flat. She was shivering, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, trying to stay calm. But her heart was racing, and her mind was spinning with worry. Her name was Emily. She was only 17, and she had been driving home from her part-time job in town when the car had suddenly started shaking. She had pulled over, stepped out, and found the tire deflated. She did not have a spare tire in the trunk. She did not have any money for a tow truck. And her phone screen showed only 2 words that made her stomach sink even more: no signal. She had tried holding the phone high in the air, turning in every direction, walking a few steps up and down the road, but it was no use. The signal bars did not appear. She felt alone and forgotten, as if the whole world had moved on without her. Cars passed by now and then, but each one kept going. The drivers would glance in her direction and then look away. Some sped up as they passed. Others slowed slightly but never stopped. Every time she saw headlights approaching in the distance, a small spark of hope would light up in her chest, but it would fade when the vehicle passed her without even slowing. She hugged herself tighter, wishing she had brought a warmer jacket, wishing she had not taken the long route home, wishing someone would stop and ask if she needed help. The sound of the wind moving through the dry grass on the roadside filled her ears. It was the only sound besides the occasional distant hum of a passing car. Her feet were sore from standing so long, and her legs ached from the cold. She kept glancing at the tire, as if staring at it might somehow make it fix itself. But deep down she knew there was nothing she could do. Not here, not alone, not without help. She thought about her mother working late at the diner, about her younger brother waiting for her at home, and about how they could not afford another repair bill. They had barely managed to keep the car running this year. And now this, she tried to push away the thought of how much this would cost. But the worry kept coming back, heavy and sharp like a stone in her chest. She felt a sting in her eyes and quickly wiped her cheeks. She told herself she had to stay strong, but it was hard when the world felt so empty around her. A few minutes passed in silence, and she was starting to think she might be out there until dark, when she noticed something different on the horizon, far down the road. A vehicle was moving toward her, but unlike the others, it was not rushing by at high speed. It was a faded blue pickup truck, the kind that looked like it had worked hard for many years. Its engine made a low, steady sound as it came closer. Emily held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest, wondering if this driver would be just like the rest, or if maybe, just maybe, they would stop. The truck slowed as it approached, the tires crunching softly against the gravel at the edge of the road. Emily felt her stomach twist with both hope and caution. She had heard stories about strangers on empty roads, and not all of them ended well. But something about the way this truck moved, steady and without rush, made her think the person inside was not there to harm her. The driver's window rolled down, and she saw a man wearing a worn cap, his face partly shadowed, his eyes watching her carefully, not with suspicion, but with concern. "You look like you could use some help," he said, his voice calm and deep. The sound cut through the wind like a warm knife through cold butter. Emily hesitated, looking at the flat tire, then at the man, then back the road behind him. It was still empty, no other cars in sight. She nodded slowly, too tired to pretend she was fine, too cold to keep standing there alone. The man pulled the truck to the side and stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and hands stained with grease. His clothes looked worn but clean, and there was a quiet steadiness about him, like someone who had seen hard days but learned how to stand firm through them. He glanced at the tire, then at her again, and gave a small nod, as if to say, "This is nothing we cannot handle." Emily felt a tiny flicker of relief, small but real. She did not know who this man was, where he had come from, or why he had chosen to stop when so many others had not. But in that moment, she knew one thing for sure. Her lonely road had just changed, and she had the feeling that this was only the beginning of something she would never forget. Emily stood very still, watching the man walk toward the back of her car. The gravel crunched under his boots, the wind pulled at his jacket, and the faint smell of oil and metal followed him like a shadow. She was shivering, But now it was not only from the cold. It was also from the strange mix of fear and relief that was rising in her chest. This man was a stranger, yet he had stopped when no one else would, and she did not know if she should feel lucky or cautious. The man knelt beside the flat tire, his eyes scanning the rim and the rubber. He reached into the back of his pickup and pulled out a small worn toolbox. The red paint on the box was chipped and scratched, a sign that it had been used many times before. He set it gently on the ground, opened it, and began pulling out tools with the kind of care that comes from habit. His hands were large and rough, and there was grease deep in the lines of his skin, but his movements were slow and steady, almost gentle. "Name's Jack," he said without looking up. His voice carried easily over the soft sound of the wind. It was not the kind of voice that demanded trust, but the kind that quietly asked for it. Emily hesitated. Her own voice feeling small in her throat, she finally answered, "I'm Emily." And the sound of her name out loud reminded her that she was still here, still in this moment, and not just drifting away in her own fear. Jack worked in silence for a while, only breaking it to ask small questions. "You out here alone? And how long have you been waiting?" His tone was calm, like he was trying not to make her nervous. Emily answered in short sentences. She told him she had been coming back from work, that she had no spare tire, and that she could not get a phone signal. Jack nodded each time, as if each detail helped him understand the whole picture. A small gust of wind blew Emily's hair across her face, and she brushed it away, looking toward the empty stretch of road ahead. She still wondered why he had stopped. She had seen dozens of cars pass without slowing. Yet here was this man with his worn cap and old truck, kneeling in the cold to help someone he had never met. She wanted to ask why, but the words stayed caught behind her lips. Jack pulled out a small pump and began filling the tire enough to move the car to a safer spot. His arms flexed as he worked, and his breath made faint clouds in the cold air. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "This time softer. I got a shop in town, small place, nothing fancy. I can fix this proper there. No charge." Emily blinked at him, unsure if she had heard him right. No charge. She wanted to believe it. But in her experience, nothing ever came for free. Still, something in his steady gaze told her he meant it. She followed slowly as Jack drove his pickup ahead of her car, leading her down the long road toward the faint outline of buildings in the distance. The sound of the truck's engine was steady and comforting, like a guide pulling her back to safety. She kept her hands tight on the steering wheel, her mind racing with questions. Who was Jack? Why was he helping her? And what would happen next? When they reached the edge of town, Jack pulled into a small gravel lot beside a modest repair shop. The sign above the door was faded but neat. It read Jackson's Auto in peeling white letters. The smell of oil and metal was stronger here, mixed with the faint scent of coffee from a mug sitting on a workbench inside. Jack waved her in, guiding her car gently over the rough ground until it was inside the garage. Then he set to work with quiet focus. Emily sat on a worn bench near the wall, watching him remove the damaged tire with practiced ease. The sound of the tools clinking against metal filled the space, along with the soft hum of a small heater in the corner. She noticed there were pictures pinned to a corkboard above the workbench. Most of them were of a young boy with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. In one picture, the boy was sitting on Jack's shoulders, laughing so hard his eyes were shut. Emily found herself staring at the photos, wondering if this was Jack's son. After a while, Jack caught her looking and gave a small smile. "That's my boy," he said, 8 years old. Smart as they come, there was pride in his voice, but also something else, a weight that seemed to sit quietly behind his words. Emily nodded, unsure what to say, but she felt a strange warmth in her chest, like she was starting to see him not just as a stranger on the road, but as a person with his own life, his own struggles. Jack finished patching the tire and slid it back into place. Wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days, he stood for a moment, looking at her, and then said simply, "All right, you're good to go. No charge. Just promise me one thing." Emily tilted her head, waiting. "If you see someone stuck out there like you were, you stop and you help." She felt her throat tighten, and for a moment she could not speak. She finally nodded, her voice barely above a whisper, "I promise," as she stepped out into the fading light of the evening. She knew she would remember that promise, and she knew her story with Jack was not finished yet. The next morning the town was quiet, the streets still damp from the light rain that had passed in the night. Jack was in his small repair shop early. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as he wiped down the tools on his workbench. The old radio in the corner played a soft country tune, and the faint hum of the heater warmed the cool air. It felt like an ordinary start to an ordinary day. Yet something about the way the sunlight pushed through the dusty window made it feel different, as if the day was holding a secret. Jack had not told Emily much about himself the night before, only bits and pieces, but while he worked on a worn brake pad that morning, his thoughts wandered back to her. He remembered the way she had stood on that lonely road, hugging herself against the cold. Her eyes unsure yet full of quiet strength. She had reminded him of someone, though he could not quite place who. Maybe it was himself years ago, standing in a different kind of cold, the kind you feel when life keeps taking from you, and you have nothing left to give except what's in your heart. He thought about his son too, about the mornings when the boy would run into the shop with messy hair and a backpack too big for his small shoulders. Jack had been raising him alone since the boy was 2. It had not been easy, but every scraped knuckle, every late night, every extra shift had been worth it just to keep that smile alive. Jack's life was simple, but it was built on the belief that kindness mattered, that you gave what you could, even when you didn't have much. Across town, Emily sat at the small kitchen table in her family's cramped apartment, the light from the window spilling across her face as she stirred a bowl of cereal without eating it. She kept thinking about Jack, about how he had stopped for her, about the pictures of his son, about the way he had asked her to promise to help someone else. Her mother had come home late from work and had been too tired to ask about the car, so Emily had simply said it was fixed, free of charge. But now she wondered if she should tell her mother more. She wondered what her mother would think if she knew about Jack. Emily's phone buzzed on the table, making her jump. She picked it up, expecting a friend or maybe a reminder from work. But the number on the screen was unfamiliar. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice careful. There was a pause, and then a calm but commanding voice replied. "Good morning. Is this Emily?" She said yes, her fingers tightening around the phone. "This is Mrs. Bennett." The voice continued. "I'm your mother's acquaintance, and I understand you had car trouble yesterday." Emily's stomach tightened. She had heard her mother mention the Bennetts before, wealthy business owners who rarely set foot in this part of town. Why would one of them be calling her? Mrs. Bennett asked few questions, her tone polite but firm. She wanted to know exactly what had happened on the road, how Emily had been helped, and who had fixed her car. Emily explained everything, her voice growing more certain as she spoke about Jack, about the way he had stopped without hesitation, about his small repair shop, and the way he had asked for nothing in return. There was a long pause on the line when she finished, the kind of pause that made Emily wonder if she had said something wrong. "I see," Mrs. Bennett finally said, her voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "Would you please give me his name and the location of his shop?" Emily hesitated, not sure if she should, but something in the woman's voice told her this was important. So she gave the details. Mrs. Bennett thanked her and hung up without another word, leaving Emily staring at the silent phone in her hand, her heart beating faster than before. She had no idea why a woman like Mrs. Bennett would care about a small town mechanic, but she had the feeling that something was about to happen. Meanwhile, Jack had finished repairing the brake pad and was washing his hands at the sink in the corner when the shop phone rang. He dried his hands quickly and picked it up, his voice steady as he said, "Jackson's Auto." On the other end came the same calm and commanding voice. "Mr. Jackson, my name is Mrs. Bennett." Jack froze for a moment, the name ringing a distant bell in his mind. He had read it in newspapers, seen it on billboards. She was not the kind of person who called a small shop like his. "I believe you helped my daughter yesterday," she continued. "I would like to meet with you today if possible." Jack looked around the shop, at the half-finished jobs waiting for his attention, at the old tools, at the framed picture of his son. He had no idea what this woman wanted, and part of him was wary. But there was something in her voice that told him this was not a request to be ignored. He agreed to meet, and she gave him an address he recognized as belonging to the tallest glass building in the city. He hung up the phone slowly, his mind turning with questions. Outside the shop, the morning sun had grown brighter, spilling across the quiet street. Yet Jack felt a strange energy in the air, as if the day was no longer ordinary. He didn't know it yet, but the call he had just taken was about to change the course of his life in ways he could not imagine. Jack spent the rest of the morning thinking about the voice on the phone. It was calm yet strong, the kind of voice that seemed used to giving orders and having them followed. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the name Mrs. Bennett. He had heard it before, in news stories, in conversations at the diner, in whispers about money and power. People said she owned half the buildings in the city. She was not someone who needed to call a man like him, and that made him Wonder why she had. The small shop felt quieter than usual. Even the radio seemed softer. Jack's son was at school, and without his laughter filling the space, the day felt slower. He poured himself another cup of coffee, but it did little to steady the uneasy feeling in his chest. He kept looking at the clock on the wall, each minute pulling him closer to the meeting he had agreed to. He didn't know what she wanted. He only knew she was not the kind of person you said no to. By early afternoon, he had locked up the shop and changed into a clean shirt. It was still a little worn, but it was the best he had. He climbed into his old pickup and started the drive toward the city. The road stretched ahead of him, lined with leafless trees that swayed in the cold wind. The hum of the engine filled the cab, and with each mile his thoughts grew heavier. He thought about Emily, about the flat tire, about how a simple act of kindness had somehow led to this. The closer he got to the city, the taller the buildings became, their glass windows reflecting the pale winter sky. His truck felt smaller and older among the sleek cars that zipped past him. The address Mrs. Bennett had given him was in the very heart of the city, a place he rarely visited. When he finally turned the corner and saw the building, his breath caught for a moment. It was a tower of silver and glass, rising high above everything else, the sunlight glinting off its edges like a blade. Jack parked his truck in a small lot across the street, feeling the stares of suited men and women as they walked past. He crossed the road and stepped through the glass doors. The warmth inside hit him instantly, along with the faint scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. The floor was smooth marble, and a large desk stood in the center. Behind it, a receptionist with a sharp smile looked up and asked his name. When he told her, she spoke into a small headset and then gestured toward a bank of elevators. Top floor, she said simply. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Jack watched the numbers climb higher and higher. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked out of place here. When the doors opened, he stepped into a wide hallway lined with framed photographs of city skylines and award ceremonies. The air was cooler here, quieter. A pair of tall double doors stood at the far end, and a man in a dark suit opened them as Jack approached. Inside the room was bright and spacious. Floor-to-ceiling windows covered one wall, showing a view of the entire city spread out below. In front of the windows stood a woman in a tailored navy dress, her hair perfectly styled. She turned as he entered, her eyes sharp yet warm. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice exactly as it had been on the phone, calm but full of something he couldn't quite name. "Thank you for coming." Jack nodded, unsure what to say. Mrs. Bennett gestured toward a chair across from her desk. He sat down slowly, the leather creaking under his weight. She folded her hands and studied him for a moment, as if she were trying to read every detail of his face. "My daughter told me what happened on that road," she began. "She told me how you stopped when no one else did, how you fixed her car and asked for nothing in return." Jack shifted slightly, feeling a little uncomfortable under her gaze. "I was just doing what anyone should do," he said, but she shook her head gently. "No, Mr. Jackson, most people don't." Her words hung in the air, and Jack could feel that there was more coming. Mrs. Bennett leaned forward, her voice lowering slightly. "I believe in rewarding kindness, especially when it comes from someone who expects nothing back." She reached for a folder on her desk and slid it toward him. "I have a proposal for you," she said, her tone steady, but carrying a weight that made him curious and cautious all at once. Jack looked at the folder, but didn't touch it yet. His mind was racing. Part of him wanted to know exactly what was inside, but another part warned him that nothing from someone like Mrs. Bennett would be simple. She was watching him closely, her eyes not missing a single flicker of doubt or interest on his face. The city lights far below began to flicker on as the day shifted toward evening, casting a golden glow across the room. Jack realized that whatever was in that folder could change his life, but he didn't yet know whether that change would be for better or worse. Jack sat with the folder in front of him, the leather chair soft beneath him, yet it felt like it was holding him in place. Mrs. Bennett's eyes stayed on him, calm but sharp, like she could see the hesitation in his hands. He slowly reached forward and opened the folder. Inside were several sheets of paper neatly clipped together. The top page had numbers printed in bold, numbers so large they made him blink. The kind of numbers he had only ever seen in lottery ads or in stories about people who lived in a completely different world from his. Mrs. Bennett leaned back slightly, her voice smooth as she spoke. "I would like to invest in you, Mr. Jackson. I want to give you the means to grow your shop into something bigger, something better, a place where you can hire help, upgrade your tools, and maybe even open a second location if you wish." Jack stared at the page, his mind struggling to keep up. She continued, "This is not charity. It is my way of thanking you for helping my daughter when you had no reason to, for showing her that kindness still exists in the world." Jack closed the folder gently, his fingers pressing against the cool cover. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I appreciate the offer, I truly do. But I'm just a small-town mechanic. I've never run anything bigger than my own shop." Mrs. Bennett's lips curved into a faint smile. "Which is exactly why I think you're the right person. You understand hard work. You value honesty. You do what's right even when no one is watching." She tapped a finger lightly against the desk. "Money can buy many things, Mr. Jackson, but it cannot buy the kind of heart you have." For a moment the room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Jack's thoughts were spinning. He pictured his small shop with its cracked floor and faded sign. He pictured his son sitting at the workbench drawing cars on scrap paper. He thought about all the times he had stayed late to finish a job just so a family could have their car back for work the next morning. He imagined what it would be like to have better tools, more space, maybe even a second lift so he could take more jobs and earn more for his boy's future. Still, a part of him was uneasy. Offers like this didn't happen to men like him. There had to be more to it. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice steady but low. Mrs. Bennett's smile softened. "The only condition is that you keep doing what you did for Emily. Help people when you can, teach others to do the same, and one day, when you see someone who needs a hand, you pass it on." Her words echoed in his head. He remembered Emily on the side of that lonely road, the way she had looked when she promised to help someone else. He realized this was the same promise, just on a much bigger scale. Still he hesitated. "Why me?" he asked again, and this time her answer came without pause. "Because my daughter needed to see that not everyone looks away, and you gave her that lesson without even knowing it. I want my daughter to live in a world where men like you are given the chance to do more." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He thought about his son again, about giving him a better life, about making sure he never had to struggle the way Jack had. He thought about the people in his town who couldn't always afford repairs, about how he could help them more if his shop was stronger. The decision felt heavy, but deep down he knew the answer was already there. He took a slow breath and said quietly, "All right, I'll accept." Mrs. Bennett nodded as if she had been expecting it. She reached into her desk and pulled out another set of papers, this time for him to sign. Her assistant entered quietly and placed a pen in front of him. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper felt almost unreal, like he was writing his name into a story he didn't fully understand yet. When it was done, Mrs. Bennett stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to a new chapter, Mr. Jackson." Jack shook her hand. Her grip was firm but warm. He noticed the faint glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes, not the cold satisfaction of a deal closed, but something deeper, perhaps relief, as if she too had been waiting for this moment. She walked him to the elevator herself, a gesture that made the suited men and women in the hallway glance in quiet surprise. As the doors closed, Jack caught one last glimpse of her standing there, a figure of power and grace framed by the light from the windows. The ride down felt longer than the ride up, each floor bringing him closer to the ground yet higher into a future he hadn't imagined when he woke up that morning. When he stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights glowed brighter against the darkening sky. He crossed the street to his truck, climbed in, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel, the folder now resting on the seat beside him. He knew his life had just changed, and though he didn't know exactly how, he was ready to find out. The weeks that followed moved quickly. Jack's small shop transformed in ways he had never imagined. The cracked floor was replaced with smooth concrete. The faded sign outside was taken down and replaced with a new one in bold, bright letters that read Jackson and Son Auto Repair. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the familiar scent of oil and metal. New tools lined the walls, shiny and ready. And for the first time, there were 2 lifts in the shop, allowing Jack to work on more cars at once. The space felt alive, full of possibility. Every morning Jack's son would run into the shop with wide eyes, exploring the new equipment and asking endless questions. Jack would smile and show him how each tool worked, teaching him the names, letting him hold the lighter ones. The boys' laughter filled the air like music, and Jack knew that every long night and every hard day had been worth it for this moment. Customers began arriving more often. Some were old friends from the town. Others were new faces who had heard about the honest mechanic who fixed a tire for a stranded girl and asked for nothing in return. Jack kept his promise to Mrs. Bennet. He made sure his prices stayed fair. He offered small repairs for free when he knew the family was struggling. And he never turned away someone who truly needed help. His reputation grew, not just as a mechanic, but as someone people could trust. Each time he helped someone, he felt the quiet echo of his promise to Emily and the unspoken trust from Mrs. Bennet. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. It was about keeping kindness alive. One cool spring morning, as Jack was working on a pickup in the garage, he heard the sound of a car pulling into the lot. When he looked up, his heart lifted. Emily was stepping out of the driver's seat, her hair brighter in the sunlight, her eyes full of warmth. She was holding a small bouquet of fresh flowers in one hand and a card in the other. She walked toward him with a smile. "Hi, Jack," she said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you again." Jack wiped his hands on a rag and took the flowers carefully. "You already thanked me," he said with a grin, but Emily shook her head. "Not for everything. When you stopped for me, you didn't just fix a tire. You showed me that there are still people who care. You helped me believe that kindness matters. And because of you, my mom saw it too." She handed him the card. The front had a simple drawing of a road leading into the horizon. Inside, written in neat handwriting, were the words kindness travels farther than we ever think. Jack felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the flowers, then at Emily. "You kept your promise," he said quietly. She nodded. "I've been helping people when I can, small things, but they matter." For a moment they stood in the sunlight, the sounds of the town around them, a shared understanding between them that didn't need many words. Later that day, Jack's son came into the shop, his small hands tucked in the pockets of his jacket. "Dad," he said, "when I grow up, I want to help people like you do." Jack crouched down, so they were eye level. "You can," he said. "And you will, because helping people doesn't take much, just a bit of time, a bit of care, and a good heart." The boy smiled, and Jack knew that his son had already learned the most important lesson he could teach. As the sun began to set, the warm orange light filled the shop, casting long shadows across the new walls and shiny tools. Jack stood at the doorway, looking out at the road beyond. He thought about the cold, windy afternoon when he had first seen Emily, about how he had almost kept driving but chose to stop. He realized that moment had been a turning point, not just for her, but for him, for his son, for the shop, and maybe for more people than he would ever know. The hum of the evening traffic mixed with the distant laughter of his boy playing in the lot, and Jack felt a deep, quiet peace settle in his chest. He understood now that kindness had a way of coming back, sometimes in ways you could never imagine, and often when you least expected it. He smiled to himself, stepped back inside, and closed the door for the night, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, because he knew that on any road, lonely or crowded, there was always someone who needed a little help, and he would be there.